computer. So I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Glad you're here. We're starting now on part 2 of the book, which talks about how God reveals things to us, and then the basic message that God is revealing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So part 2 starts with a little bit about how God reveals things to us. This first chapter, God offers guidance to improve our lives. This chapter shows us how God leads us from the hell that we create into the heaven that could be. The door to heaven is open, and we can enter whenever we choose. Living our lives according to God's guidance manifests heaven in our lives. God sees us clearly, knows everything about us, and knows what's best for us. Through Jesus's life and the story represented in the Gospels, through the testimony of religious leaders and the church, and through our own experiences with one another, there are so many ways that God guides us from where we are to the glory of where we could be. God will keep patiently guiding us all until we finally see the true glory of God that we reflect in love and community. God will keep patiently guiding us all until we finally see the blessing and joy in caring for one another. God will keep patiently guiding us all until we finally see how we are all uniquely beautiful and yet all one. So this chapter is talking about different ways that God can reveal God's self to us. So I have a question here, similar to the one that Ed was asking, only this is just more general in your life. How have you received God's message in your life? Have you been inspired by a minister or other church leader? Have you been inspired by reading the Bible? Have you heard God in the voice of someone else? Seen God in the actions of someone else? Have you felt God's presence in your soul causing you to have a change of heart? So what are some of the ways that you all have experienced God speaking to you, whether it's through someone else, through reading, through just a feeling? Anybody want to share?
I will.
Okay.
You all know I was a preacher's kid. And we went to church as often as my dad could figure out a reason for us to go. I paid attention, but then my mind would wander. And the Nazarenes had something called district superintendents. I don't know what they do in other churches, but the district superintendent for East Tennessee was a person named Glenn Griffith. And when he delivered a sermon, you paid attention because he had a way with words. He could put a picture together with his words that stood with you. And I don't know what the sermon was about, but he described the Pacific Northwest in such incredible detail that as a 12 or 13-year-old, whatever I was, it's like, when I grow up, I'm living there. After I got out of nursing school, I packed up my bags in the car and headed west. Somewhere in the mountains in Nevada, I totaled my car and had to put everything in boxes and get the rest of the way by train. Got there, didn't know a soul. But 50 some odd years later, look at the life God let me lead. It's amazing. And you can look at it after everything is done and see, okay, God had a hand in this because he woke you up and had you pay attention to a sermon that probably nobody else could tell you Glenn Griffith delivered that day. But I'm always struck by looking back on things. And as difficult as it was, sometimes it was horribly lonely, not knowing it. Ain't gonna happen. So it is amazing what God has provided for me in my life.
Awesome. That's awesome. Anybody else want to share how you've been inspired either by a person, by reading, by a feeling? John Swarzak?
Yes. Not till later in my life, after a lot of introspective work, did I really experience a connection to God as a deep visceral connection. It wasn't in my head. And it was a feeling of being connected to everything. No separation between I and thou. Being connected with all things. People, animals, trees, mountains. And it wasn't anything up here, but it was a knowing in the tissues of my body. And when that happened, I realized that if I'm available to things, everything will speak to me. I can listen, I can hear things. But prior to that, it was all an intellectual experience. And it was quite a blessing to feel that, I'll call it kind of a relational field with everything. Again, trees, objects, turtles, people, anything. And that I knew there was no separation between myself and anything. Mm-hmm. And that really brought God home to me.
That's nice. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Rosie, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, for years I did a lot. I belonged to a lot of different churches and did transcendental meditation, guided meditation. I was always trying to have some type of a spiritual path. And a few years back, I heard someone say, when we pray, we're trying to communicate or call God. And when we get an intuitive flash, it's could be God trying to communicate to us. And I've always had a really good intuition. I mean, from the time I was 5, and I think I attribute a lot to being involved in entertainment, music, writing songs, that part of my brain. And but it was just about 5 or 6 years ago that I finally, that hit me. And I was like, practice. I mean, just let's say you get an intuitive thought. But I really do think of it as God. It's not, well, Rosie's got it together, or she's wonderful, or she's an artist. Therefore, it's okay, God, And sometimes if I still feel unsettled, I will go to I have my meditation prayer work chair. And I will go there and say, and, talk to him, close my eyes. Because I struggle sometimes with my will, not his. And I want to have his will, not mine. And, and another thing that sometimes has helped me, went to a lecture years ago in San Diego by Matthew Fox. I had no clue who he was, nothing, but he said one thing at that time, and it stuck to me, that we were going to have to rise above apathy. And if we continue to be apathetic, we're going to struggle in this world, or we're going to have challenges. And, you know, that one word, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, like, give of yourself, get involved. And, you know, and also just sometimes it hits me like Dr. Martin Luther King and, you know, Gandhi and these folks, like, okay, they were brilliant and spiritual and all that. And I think, I don't know why, it just keeps coming up, nonviolence. And I mean, why are we hearing their message so beautifully and clearly? Because they're not coming from guns and violence and ego and all that, you know? So I really appreciate those. Mother Teresa, I have plaques of hers and do small things with great love. Man, that just humbles me. Do I do it all the time? Heck no. But I have that in my bedroom and I love it. You know, I try to change some things.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's
Yeah.
enough. Thank you, Patricia.
Yeah, very inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. Ed, you had your hand up?
I just wanted to say that I agree with everything that's been said. And in addition to that, I want to say that a lot of times music in particular has really, I felt this deep connection. I remember one time I was singing in a choir and we were singing Vivaldi's Gloria at Christmas time. And I started losing my balance during one of these sections of that sacred text because it was so beautiful. I just felt like I was elevated and I had trouble staying balanced where I was. And particularly a cappella music or just different kinds. It didn't even have to have words necessarily. But there's something about that really speaks to me. And then in the last few years, even sometimes some of the visual arts that we've talked about, like the altars and different things. And so I feel God through music and art and those vibrations. God speaks through those ways to our hearts.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably true for a lot of us as well.
Mhm.
Anyone else want to share ways that you've been inspired, felt you were getting a message from God through someone, something you read, through a feeling?
I'll give a little offering here.
right.
My Christian experience started by I was blessed to go to a tent revival meeting back in the Midwest that was conducted by Oral Roberts, who went on to establish the Oral Roberts University and have a tremendous outreach through that particular facility. Then my dad, my mom passed away when I was just a child, and my dad remarried, and he was a member of the Southern Baptist Church. And of course, I went to those services. But when he remarried, the woman that he married was a member of the Disciples of Christ, or First Christian churches. And so then I started going there. And then when I moved to California, I didn't feel particularly drawn to the Disciples Church that I had attended as a child or as a youngster or a teenager. But one of the people that I fell in love with was very much into not Scientology, Mormonism. And so for about 4 years, I actually was a part of the Mormon Church. And then that ended because I couldn't deal with some of their beliefs and some of the things that the the pastor was trying to tell me. And plus, they had a problem with Black people being a member of their church, and I didn't think that was very Christian. So then I moved on, and I had another lover then who wanted to explore Nichiren Shoshu Buddhism, that you would more commonly recognize as Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. And so I was involved in that for a period of time, but and then ultimately saw an advertisement in the Advocate for Troy Perry and the starting of MCC. And then that's where I've been for the last, 53 years. But my point is that exposure to all of the different methodologies, different denominations, different religions, really gave me different messages that God spoke to me through each one of them. Mm-hmm. And then for a period of time, Ed mentioned music. For about 3 years, on Saturdays, I would go over to a Catholic church in West Hollywood, and they had a 40-voice male schola that sang the Mass in Gregorian chant in English. And that was one of the most elevating experiences I've ever had. So I've just experienced God in numerous ways, everything
Mhm.
from Buddhism to Mormonism to Catholicism to Protestantism. And each one of those gave me lessons and values that became very important in my spiritual life.
It's awesome. I'd actually like to share one of the ways that God has spoken to me. It was through Reverend Neil Thomas when I was going to Founders Church. They have two services, or at least they did at the time, and I generally went to the earlier service. There was one night when I had a lot of questions, and I was asking God to answer my questions, and I couldn't sleep. So I got up that morning. I couldn't get up in time to go to the first service. So I had to go to the second service. So I went to the second service, and as Reverend Thomas was preaching, the things he was saying was an answer to my question. He did everything but say, "Patricia, this is the answer." I mean, it was like the perfect answer to the question I had been asking God the night before. And I was amazed by how in sync that was. But then I was even more amazed because after he said that, he said, "I have no idea why I just said what I said. That's not what I said in the first service. That's not what I planned to say. Somebody must have needed to hear that." I just about fell out of my chair. It's like,
Wow.
he said that just for me. He said that just for me. So that was just an amazing experience. And I don't even remember what the question was. I don't remember what the answer was. I remember so vividly that what I gained from that is that God will answer my prayers if I just listen in places that I wouldn't expect it, because I'm a very logical person. There's no way I would expect somebody I hadn't talked to about the problem to basically say, "And here's the answer." So yeah, it was a really inspirational message that I got from him. Even if the only message I at the time I got an answer, but the message I've kept with me is that God will answer. So I thought that was pretty cool. Tom?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief because this could be like the rest. No, but in the ways of God speaking to me, like in that, all of the above, for one thing. But a couple of things, what you just reminded me of was my very first walking into a service at our church, MCC in the Valley. And the same thing, not that I was actually doing something, but everything in the service felt like it was geared exactly to me, which is why from that first service, I know this is my spiritual home, no question about it. And, and one other thing just before that, well, way before that, I was back east. I was going, was my good Catholic boy, and I've gone through Fordham University and the prep and the university. I loved their service. I didn't like the local church where I was going to in Mount Vernon or Pelham, but I love the university churches. And one epiphany of all times, in I guess it was 1984, I'm at the service and I got this clear epiphany. You need to move to Los Angeles. Okay. And, within a couple of months, I did just that. And, so yeah, and one other thing I just want to point out is that, yeah, music has been very important throughout my life, but also being inspired to write music, write songs and poetry and lyrics and the best, not all of them, but the best of them when I go now that I've recently getting back into my music and I'm reviewing my my volumes of songs that I've written and a couple of times how did this tune go and all whatever, but whenever I put the best of them together, I can see that is I couldn't have come up with that. How?
Yeah.
It has to be divine inspiration.
Yeah.
And the St. Francis Pal, God, let me be an instrument of your, peace. And that is making God, God's making me God's instrument in my creativity. So.
That's great. That's awesome. Anyone else? I'll go ahead and share the next question. Tom, do you have your Bible with you again? Can you read Revelation 4:1 for us?
I should, okay, 4:1. After I looked, and there in heaven a door stood open, and the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, I will show you what must take place after this."
So the voice speaking to him sounded like a trumpet. What do any of you think might be the significance of the voice from heaven sounding like a trumpet? I mean, I've shared a lot about what I think the metaphors mean. What do you think it means that a voice from heaven would sound like a trumpet?
Well, in general, a trumpet is something that's very clear and distinctive. So it's like, it's not like a little heartbeat. No, it's like, da, da, da. It's like, it gets your attention and okay.
It's majestic.
Proclamation. Weren't like kings announced with trumpets like da, 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 royal proclamation?
Yeah.
A fanfare.
Fanfare, yeah.
The military uses a trumpet to start the day and finish the day. So it's almost like the alpha and the omega.
Yeah. So we'll get to this series of trumpets a little bit later. But before the series of trumpets is the series of the 7 seals. So I'll share. So this is the beginning of what God revealed to us, that the passage before says things about only Jesus was able to open the seals. So the series of the 7 seals is often referred to as the first of multiple series in the Revelation to John of God enacting God's wrath against people. But in the Revelation to John, God is not active in anything that happens when the seals are open. In John's time, seals were placed on scrolls containing legal evidence or other official documentation. So it follows John's imagery more closely to understand that the opening of the seals is displaying evidence of what's already happening. The depictions of events revealed when the seals are open describe the real world in poignant metaphorical language. So let's get into a little bit on the seals. We'll talk about the first 4 seals today. The first 4 seals is where we get the imagery of the 4 horsemen. But you'll see as I go through this that I very much disagree with exactly what those 4 horsemen are. So seal 1. This chapter paints a picture revealed when the first seal is opened. The first 4 seals reveal 4 horsemen wearing different symbolic colors. This first horseman is wearing white and has the ability to conquer all the other horsemen. The sealed truth in our hearts shows that sometimes we ride the white horse of love. Love is the most holy truth in our lives. Love compels us to care about one another, show grace and compassion, lift each other up, and forgive one another. Love carries with it the promise of a happier, more joyous life for everyone. When we ride the horse of love, it can and will continue to conquer our temptations for evil. So Tom, can you read for us? Before we get into this actual section of the seals, I'd like you to skip ahead to, it's actually a typo in the book. It says Revelation 9, but it's supposed to be Revelation 19, 11 through 14.
11 through 14. And okay. The rider on the white horse. Oh, okay. Then I saw heaven open, and there was a white horse. Its rider is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems, and he has a name inscribed that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, wearing fine linen, white and pure, were following him on the white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God, the Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh, he has a name inscribed, King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Mm-hmm. So the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, we know that as representing Jesus. Also, this passage talked about the tongue being a double-edged sword again. Remember when we first saw the image of the Son of Man, his tongue was a double-edged sword. And I will get into a little bit later here. It talks about the wrath and the fury with the winepress and everything. I'll get to into that a little bit later because it describes it more later. But it says here in Revelation 19 that the rider of the white horse is faith and truth, or what were the two?
Faithful and true, called faithful and true.
Faithful and true. So that doesn't sound like a negative horseman to me, the rider of this white horse. Can you then go back and read for us Revelation 6:2?
I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider had a bow. A crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer.
Mm-hmm. So it says he came out conquering and to conquer, but he's the rider of the white horse, which in Revelation 19, 11 through 16, John described that rider of the white horse a little bit more, and that's very much the description of Jesus, or of faithful, true love. We talked earlier about being clothed in the white linens is a sign of being clothed in good deeds. So to me, this first horse is the good horse, and it says it has the power to conquer all. But we say a lot of times that love has the power to conquer hate, and that the only thing that has the power to conquer hate is love. So I've also heard that the rider of this first horse is called pestilence, which is like disease. So the rider of this first horse is disease. You want to read Revelation 6:2 again and see if there's pestilence and disease on there?
6:2. I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider had a bow, a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. Nothing about pestilence. Also, another thing in 1913, his name is called the Word of God,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
Christ.
Yeah, so I think this first horse is the good horse, and it does have the power to conquer all, and it is carrying a bow, like Cupid carries a bow, an arrow. So that's not necessarily a weapon. That's not necessarily a dangerous thing. I see this first horse as the good horse that we sometimes ride. You know, Jesus was riding this horse. We sometimes ride this horse. It talked in Revelation 19 about the army following him, wearing our white linens of good deeds. So the first horseman, I don't agree is pestilence. I think the first horseman is love. That's one of the states that we can be in. So if we get to the second horseman, this chapter paints a picture revealed when the second seal is opened. The second horseman is wearing red, carrying a large sword, and has the power to take peace from the earth and make people kill each other. The sealed truth in our hearts shows that sometimes we ride the red horse of domination and violence. We permit violence to take away our peace from the earth. When we ride the horse of domination, we live in anger, vengeance, hatred, war, murder, gang violence, domestic violence, control of one another, and threats against each other, roaming the earth, slaughtering and maiming and injuring one another. Now, it's customary to think of this horse as the god of war. It does talk about waging war, or I say more generally, the god of violence. So in a way, I do agree with the common interpretation here of the second horseman. But Tom, if you can read Revelation 6:4, and as he's reading it, I want you all to listen to information about the sword and where the sword came from.
And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people would slaughter one another, and he was given a great sword.
He was given a great sword. Does it say who gave him the sword?
Nope.
He was given a great sword. Revelation 6:4 says that the rider dressed in red was given a sword, but it doesn't say who gave the rider the sword. The traditional understanding may be that God gave the rider the sword, permitting violence, but John doesn't say that. So my question is it possible that people gave the rider the sword? What would it mean metaphorically for people to give a sword to the horsemen of domination, conflict, and violence?
It's a support for violence. It's like, yeah, let's give money for our armaments, and let's vote the strongest person in, and you know, we need that defense. Let us give our power to this negative force.
Anyone else?
That's totally opposite to what that white horse is trying to do, trying to bring peace and conquer this negative energy.
And what happens when we have this anger and we give that anger a sword? What happens when we give our own anger a sword?
That's when we do damage.
The rider was given a sword. Doesn't say God gave it to him.
The anger increases and then it keeps going, like we see in society, how things,
a lot of violence
and negative and hatred, and it keeps on rolling. Yeah, it just
Almost reminds me of what's been happening in our country in the last several months.
right.
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
January 6th insurrection, for example.
Yeah.
Ed?
You know, if you just take red before getting to the violence part, just red in and of itself isn't necessarily bad. Blood can be life-giving.
Mhm.
You know, red can be passion. Red can be a stuff like this says, hey, let me stop when I'm, let someone else go. And maybe this is the horseman, what happens when I carry it too far. Passions get so passionate, I can hurt you in the name of this thing I believe in over here.
Mm-hmm.
And red's the vibration of the first chakra,
Mm.
defensive,
Mhm.
Mhm.
that we need to get up.
But not give it a sword. Not give it a sword.
Not just a sword, a bloody sword.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So horseman number 3. This chapter paints a picture revealed when the third seal is opened. The third horseman is wearing black, is carrying scales to weigh goods, and is calling out to barter. The sealed truth in our hearts shows that sometimes we ride the black horse of materialism and greed. We constantly want more for ourselves. We take advantage of one another and cheat one another with lies and deception. We cherish material riches over people's lives. When we ride the horse of materialism, we put luxuries and comforts for ourselves ahead of the basic needs of others. So horse number 3 is commonly known as the horse of famine. But one thing you have to remember is in this first century, when this book was written, a lot of people lived rural lives. A lot of people lived out in the countryside. A lot of the people he was speaking to were farmers. And throughout Revelation, there is a lot of metaphoric imagery about growing grain and harvesting grain, things that farmers would do. And one thing that I have noticed is that most of the time when writers talk about famine, they talk about the fields not producing, the fields going dry. There is no crop, the sun is scorching. That's how I hear most of the time people metaphorically talk about famine. Tom, can you read a Revelation 6:6 for us?
Okay. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a day's pay and 3 quarts of barley for a day's pay, but do not damage the olive oil and the wine.
Mm-hmm. So they're not talking about fields not producing, but we're for basic staples, for your wheat to make your bread is a day's pay. And be careful of the luxury items, the oil and wine. So Revelation 6:6, a voice calls out saying that food staples cost a day's wages, and we must protect the luxury goods of oil and wine.
Wow.
So what do you see as the symbolism behind the way this horseman is bartering his goods? Does it say anything about there being famine, about there being a shortage?
No, it's just the distribution of goods, like what's happening with our, ultra capitalism and greed. That's, you have what, 0.1% owning 95% of everything produced on Earth, and then the rest scattered among the masses.
And if crumbs are all we're going to get, maybe if we spend our money on the wine and oil, we won't be able to feed our families the wheat or the necessities. And then we're in trouble, like credit card debt, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't see this horse at all as being there's not enough. I see it as being the way that the goods are being sold, what's being charged. So the fourth horse.
Imbalance, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Because it said a balance, but this is imbalance if 1% has 90% of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
just before that, held a pair of scales in his hand. but it's sort of like tipping the scales, putting that thumb.
Cheating the scales a little bit, yeah.
You know, I heard about a teacher made a cake and gave it to the kids and said, okay, now we're going to take this price of one brownie, and all 30 of you kids get one brownie, and then the other kid gets the whole rest of the thing. And all the kids went, wow, that's not fair.
Yep.
Imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
So we could rename these passion and balance instead of, I mean, we don't have to see them necessarily as these bad things. It's like, hey, it is a good idea if I balance what I do have, be a steward of what I do have. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, the first horse, if he had passion before we was given the sword, he was fine until we gave him the sword. And this third horseman, he has the scales to balance. And what does he do? He charges a whole day's wages for the wheat you need for your bread.
And very high prices. Think about that now and here. Of the prices are just gone like 4 or 5 times higher for the people to be able to afford to get the needs.
The idea that more is somehow better, and it isn't necessarily. There are people that have everything and they're miserable. And there are people that don't have a lot and they're able to see glory in God and have gratitude.
Right.
So that's a lie that more is not always better.
Yeah. So then we get into seal number 4, the fourth horseman. This chapter paints a picture revealed when the fourth seal is opened. The fourth horseman is wearing pale green, and death and hell follow it wherever it goes. The sealed truth in our hearts shows that sometimes we ride the pale green horse of apathy. We ignore the trials of others as long as it's not happening to us. We allow our appreciation for love and our sense of holy relationship with one another to die. We create hell on earth for the vulnerable among us by relinquishing our role in upholding community. When we ride the horse of apathy, we allow systemic injustices of racism, sexism, classism, ableism to cause all kinds of harm to other people, and we fail to protect the poor and the vulnerable. We may not be causing the destruction, but death and hell follow us wherever we go. So Tom, can you read Revelation 6:8 for us?
I looked, and there was a pale green horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed with him. They were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, famine, and pestilence, and by the wild animals of the earth.
So they're given authority to kill, but I say that the way that this last horse kills is by allowing the sword to kill people, allowing famine and disease to kill people, allowing the wild beasts to kill other people. By not, you protect yourself from wild beasts by going out in numbers and making sure that there's enough of you. That's how all animals protect themselves from the predator, is by being in numbers. So when we relinquish community, we allow these other harms to kill people. So I said here that Revelation 6:8 says that the rider dressed in pale green and the desolation that follows it wherever it goes has the power to kill with a sword from the horseman in red, to kill from hunger from the horseman in black, and to kill by a lack of protection from nature. Revelation 6:8 says that death and hell were given the power to kill, but it doesn't say who gave them that power. The horsemen of domination and violence and the horsemen of materialism and greed only have the power to kill when good people don't stand up to stop them. When a few people attack with swords or with greed, and the masses of people let them, how is the apathy of the masses contributing to the death or hell of the vulnerable? And who gives the horsemen of domination or materialism the power to torture or kill?
Repeat the question again.
So, I mean, we talked in the last two writers about, you know, how violence hurts people and how greed, materialism hurts people because, you know, you're charging too much for the goods. But there's a fourth horse here that can also hurt people. And to me, this horse is basically when the rest of us allow those two horses, the violence and the greed, to hurt people, when we don't step up, when we allow the sword to kill, when we allow famine to kill, when we allow natural disasters to kill other people because we're not protecting them. What are our responsibilities as being part of a community? And how are we responsible for not protecting people?
By not being apathetic. You mentioned the word apathy, the horse of apathy.
Mm-hmm.
And if we stand by and do nothing, I have to relate that back to the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
When they were going and killing the Jews, and different people said, and I said nothing, and then they were gone, and now when they come for me, there's no one to stand up for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the lesson to stand up for each other. And then getting back to the scales, if we spend all of I don't think it's that you can't have some luxury, but I think it's a lesson to not spend all of your money for the luxury so that you don't have any money with which to buy necessities for both you and other people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
I think this has a lot to do with what we call the systemic sins that, you know, oh, I'm living a comfortable enough life, so what if, you know, people are starving here? It's like, not that you don't care, but
Mhm.
what are we doing to, hey, are we speaking truth to power enough? Are we trying to be activist enough to change the status quo, and
Mhm.
instead of like, oh, this is nice, yeah, yeah, well, I deserve to have a little bit of, you know, and not get involved enough. Yeah.
Mhm.
How are we contributing to allowing climate change to?
Mhm.
Because, well, I'm comfortable. I need to lower the, you know, I need to put in the air conditioner a little bit more because I'm too hot. Wait a second. You're using and that, you know, we are. I know I am myself. I am guilty of a lot of these things.
Mhm.
And you know, to take personal responsibility.
Mhm.
Well, and your comment about the community, when enough people in the community speak up, things change. That's how you have
That's
revolution.
right. Yep.
Now, I don't buy prosperity gospel. I don't think God intends some of us to be rich or all of us to be rich, or you wouldn't say it's easier to get through the eye of a camel to get through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. So we have to love our neighbors, treat our neighbors as we want to be treated.
Yeah.
So can the white horse of love conquer these other three?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Can
And
anything?
that's the answer. Love, compassion. And it's sort of like, wait, I will not stand to see my brothers and sisters being treated the way they're being treated, to go hungry, to die of starvation. No, I'm not stand for that. I love them too much. I love the earth too much to let it be destroyed by corporations that want to keep depleting our resources.
You have to take action though.
Mhm.
You have to organize and decide what you're going to be part of to help. We have to take action.
Because even if you're
I
not,
mean, we can
God's-
talk intellectually, it doesn't do a darn thing, doesn't change anything. But having the discussion and then realizing, okay, maybe we can do something. Let's talk about that. And then let's decide what we're willing to do. Certain people do certain things and and get the results.
Yeah.
For humanity, for social justice.
Right.
I can only speak for me, but to me, the lesson is to, even if you can only give in a small way, you can give to organizations like Mercy Ships, for example, that give free operations to people in third world countries. You can donate to hospitals like St. Jude's, which never charge the children or the parents for their care or their housing. And again, you may not be able to do a lot, but if everybody does a little, it becomes a lot.
Right.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, you don't have to be causing harm for death and hell to follow you. You just have to be not protecting people, not giving the benefits of community.
Would you say being complicit?
But
So maybe caring, it's like sometimes looking at that child and treating them not like a non-person, or the woman that she's less than a man, or the gay person less than a straight, or the African American or person of color less than a white person. And maybe just sometimes I found if you just listen to people, if you just be present for them, all the answers just kind of come. It's like God tells us what to do. It's not even hard. All that stuff I donated to the pantry at church, that was food I didn't eat anyway. And someone else grabbed that up and ate it. It was easy. It wasn't even that hard.
Yes. So we start off with this first horse, the white horse, that I say is the imagery of Jesus when John describes that white horse in more detail later. And it does say that this white horse has the power to conquer all. So people then are afraid of this white horse. But to me, love is what has the power to conquer violence and greed and apathy. And in fact, love is the only thing that has the power to conquer violence and greed and apathy.
I think we get hung up on the word conquer. Some people think that conquer is very negative, but if you can substitute the word overcome for conquer, then it takes on a slightly different meaning.
I think too, there's when I started reading your book, Patricia, that word community, I have a friend that's really into community. And since I've been around her, it makes me think about community. And then your book talks about it a lot at the beginning. And again, the way we've evolved, we've gotten away from community. Like we say intellectually, oh, it takes a village. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. But I mean, what really do we mean by community? And how does community act? And who belongs to community or has the sense of what community does, as opposed to being in your individual homes, So that really, when I think of that, I think of Christ, And, but yeah, I think we've gotten away from that word. And I don't know, it's almost like my heart, my essence longs for it. And I have to say, I appreciate that more because I moved up here for family and lost my family. So I do have friends. I have program, church. I have a lot of positive things I do. But to be able to, I have family in other states, but to get that same kind of sense that, I can call Paul about something and he can help me, or because of meeting y'all at the church, I can call Ed and go to dinner or whatever. It's a real treasure and a gift. you know,
Yeah,
and we've
definitely.
kind of gotten away from it.
Mhm.
Which all this chaos we've had going on, you know, boy, does having a feeling, I mean, this lunch bunch, even Reverend Pat 2 years ago sent me an email. I didn't even know who she was. And, you know, I tapped into that at a time when I was so sad and felt lonely. And my family was gone, and I was trying to tap into a church. It was Holy Week. And Ed was there. And I think, oh, and anyway, so it was like, oh my God, thank you, God. You know, we had services that whole week, and I got to know a few, you know, oh my God, you know, that was a treasure.
I gotta tell you guys something real quick. We're talking about compassion and reaching out to people that need some help,
Mhm.
financial, you know, whatever is the need. When I was 16 months old, I was in a car fire, and I ended up in LA's. Oh gosh, I'm losing my thought. I can't think of the hospital right now. It's a children's hospital in LA.
Hey, children.
Yeah. So, but that's not the name of it. Their compassion from the people that came from the outside of the hospital to those who were caring for me. There was never 1 cent out of my parents' pocket for my care for 16 years.
Mm.
And that has stayed with me all my life, because if it wasn't for those people helping out financially, I wouldn't be here.
Mhm.
So
Glad you're here.
yeah, me too.
Amen
Thank
to
you.
that.
But there was a lot of people who understood that this little girl, this baby, needed some help.
You did help.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, you're talking about community, the lunch bunch. I'm amazed every day. Different topics will come up. Today, people that had experience with mattresses was giving advice to someone who was looking for a mattress.
Wow.
People on other events who wanted things delivered to their house because they couldn't get out, and different people had experiences with different delivery services. So it's the people that have the knowledge share it with the people that don't have the knowledge, and that becomes a complete sense of community, at least to
Right.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been able to get connected on Lunch Bunch yet. So
It's the same link that you're on tonight,
Yeah.
as a matter of
yeah,
fact.
it's not the link is being
The time.
Oh, the time.
pulled
Okay.
to
Yeah.
other things. Yeah.
I got you. Well, when you're able to, you'll be welcome. We're here for you.
Thank you.
So I have to wrap up for tonight, but I want you guys to think about these 4 horsemen and what they tell us about what is and what could be. And this is only 4 of the 7 seals. So we'll go on to the next 3 seals next week. So with that, I will stop the recording and let Ed close out the night.